Okay, guys. So I saw today, it was a couple of days ago, it resonated in my mind. I saw a post from the Nationwide about the rental market. The rental market is unusually uncertain, apparently anyway. So I thought I'll do a quick show with Richard and we'll have a wee discussion about it. So I've got Richard Cook, the Lettings Director, on here. Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. Afternoon, Jim. How are you?
Aye, pretty good, thanks. The market is buoyant, put it that way. We're busy.
I think the use of the word apparently anyway as the right word to use. I think when I read the article, I think the title caught me, and I thought, but yeah, as you read through, I think that obviously a lot of it is based on obviously England and in and around cities like London and things as well. And I think although we're seeing similar trends as what they spoke about in the article, I think that, it doesn't have such the same effect in Fife as such.
Yeah.
We see people moving from their interest in flats to more houses because obviously COVID's made people spend more time at home, and they're obviously looking for gardens and extra room for an office or what have you, which is obviously going to be a problem if you're in and around bigger towns and cities where predominantly flats are for let. But I think definitely it's not so much a problem in Fife where we have quite a lot of houses, and we still shift flats quite regularly, and we still have a demand there as well. So
absolutely. I mean, let's look at the article itself.
Yeah.
And let's look at so the outlook for the rental market is unusually uncertain after 2 decades of growth, according to a new report. Wow. It'll be interesting to see where this report comes from, but let's talk about it. It suggests that the future is clouded by economic uncertainty and housing preferences shifting during lockdown. Well, there's no doubt about that anyway. I mean, the economic chief economist said that the outlook is unusually uncertain in the wake of COVID-19. The review carried out by the Mortgage Works. Now, the Mortgage Works is one of the biggest buy-to-let lenders in Britain. It is owned by the Nationwide, and it's the buy-to-let arm of the Nationwide itself, as well as the enormous uncertainty they're seeing in the near-term path for the economy. There is also the scope for the pandemic to have a profound effect on the pattern of economic activity and housing demand in the years ahead. I mean, that's the chief economist, Robert Gardner, that says that. Analysis of these official figures in the rental market review found the proportion of households renting privately, now this is the key here, in England, and edged downwards in the third year in a row. In 2020, it fell to 18.7% from 19.3% the year before. I mean, that's no earth-shattering, really.
It's not a big drop, really, in the grand scheme of things, but I mean, obviously it's something to keep an eye on.
I mean, what's your outlook on the Fife rental market? How does this affect the Fife rental market?
Well, I think obviously they see a lot of changes have come into play due to COVID. I mean, people are working from home; they're not needing to commute. They want extra outdoor space and things, and home offices, like we've said. So it's changed people's perspective and what they actually look for in a rental home. But in terms of obviously affecting the demand in the area, demand's never been higher. We're obviously on a shortage of property at the moment, so the supply is low. We can see that obviously we spoke about the figures obviously recently about how much properties are actually available on the market at the moment, which is very low. So yeah, I mean, business is booming. I mean, we are so busy. We don't have enough properties to fill to accommodate the people that want to fill them, and that's how we are at the moment. I mean, obviously things are not going to continue at that level. And will obviously in time come back down to a more obviously equilibrium with things, but at the moment we're on a high.
What do you think is causing this high then in terms of the rental market?
Well, I think because obviously I think we've still got a bit of a knock-on effect from obviously the backlog of obviously the initial lockdown, where we kind of ceased to be allowed to do any transactions in housing. I think during the second lockdown we were then classed as an essential service, which is we should have been maybe first time round. I don't know whether that was the right decision or not, but because we were obviously not allowed to do any new transactions with lettings during the first lockdown, we had such a backlog of tenants. I mean, you'll know how fast paced the lettings market is, and things just changed from one week to the next. So we were then trying to accommodate all these people that were looking from before, and then plus all the new people that were coming forward, moving home for a change in their circumstances, like I say, whether it's obviously upsizing or relocating. And I think that's just had a knock-on effect throughout, and then left us with a short supply and a high demand. But and also I think I've seen a lot of new investors coming forward recently. I'm working with so many new investors, which is great for obviously for the private rented sector, because it's going to be bringing a lot of new, fresh people into the equation and bringing properties to the market.
So why are you working with a lot of new investors? What's this trend? What's happened here? Is this people saying we're not getting enough return on their money?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that is a big, I mean, a lot of it is people who are using, even like they say, retirement funds or building a retirement funds. People have money in the bank that's sitting idle, and have cottoned on to the fact that property is a good way of us making a return on your investment, your tax-free investments, that obviously you could be using your money to input into that, rather than, like I say, idly sitting in the bank. And I see a lot of that and coming through recently.
Do you think it's the old adage about safe as houses?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people have that same mindset. Definitely.
Okay, I mean, they had cited several reasons for the shift, which started from the pandemic hit, and they include the increased regulation and tax changes it's actually putting off investors. And we, undoubtedly we have that as well, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of changes in legislation and obviously tax changes recently and things as well. And I have had conversations with existing landlords who have felt that maybe there's so much changes that it maybe isn't the right fit for them anymore. They've done it for a lot of years. So there is some investor landlords and things that are exiting the market, but I think that's offset by the amount of people that new investors that are coming through. And I think if you've got an agent in place, and I mean, we spend daily not keeping up to date with new legislation and the compliance for properties and things. So if you've got an agent in place managing it, they do all that for you, and that's an important thing as well, especially if you're an investor. They don't need to worry about all these changes and things as well.
I mean, they got the question there now from somebody. What about the rent? Would you say the rents have increased in the local area?
Oh yeah, definitely. Rents have increased. I think rental, and even at the higher rent rates, because we've got so much demand, they're pushing them up even further, because people are prepared to pay more, rather than lose out and then be stuck, obviously looking for another property, which there's quite a low supply of at the moment. So it's pushing things up quite high. And I'm doing record rental prices at the moment on property.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. So what do you think is driving that record rental price?
Well, as I say, it's the demand. It's the demand that's doing it. Because there's very few properties. When we have a property on the market, we've got so much inquiries, and the process in which you have to go through now is so. I mean, the due diligence we're doing on potential tenants now is so strict that obviously people are prepared to pay a higher rent if that means they're going to be accepted for the property rather than lose out. So I think all these different factors kind of attribute to that.
Is there a restriction in supply just now, do you think?
Oh yeah, very much so. I think you say restriction in supply, the properties are there, it's trying to obviously get them to the market. I mean, like I said, I'm speaking to a lot of landlord investors at the moment. There's properties in the pipeline. It's just trying to get them over the line and get them on the market. I think that's a big problem at the moment.
Do you find that you're renting properties before they even get to the market?
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. I mean, before we're even hitting the portals, we are obviously pre-launching properties on social media and things before they even go to the portals. Sometimes I'm renting them before I even do that, because obviously we've got such a backlog of people. I mean, in previous years and things, I didn't always like to say I've got a list of people waiting, because things changed that much. And if you had one person looking 1 week, the next week they were gone because they were waiting on another property. At the moment, it's not like that, and I do have people sitting weeks on end waiting for the right property to come around. So yeah, we're letting them before it's even pre-launched or on the websites.
So when you say pre-launch there, what is that?
Pre-launch is what we do, obviously, prior to it hitting portals and going out on all these platforms. We, at the property, do a quick walk round, put it out on the local social media page, which is relevant to that area. And obviously people that are following that page then obviously get the instant, obviously if I go live, it instantly notifies them I'm going live, and I'm pre-launching this property, they could message me direct, and you could get put through the process for application before the property is even on the market.
So before the property even gets the right move in prime location, Zoopla.
It gives you such an advantage, yeah, definitely.
So is the recommendation then that most people that are looking for rented properties and probably for sale properties actually follow Facebook pages?
Yeah, and I reiterate this, and I know you do the same, Jim, as well with your sales, but I reiterate this when I'm doing my quick vlogs or speaking to people in person or online, is that if you're looking for a property in a particular area, whether it's Leaving, Glenrothes, East Neuk, St Andrews, follow that individual social media page, and you will get the live updates of pre-launches for properties for let, and of course for sale as well.
Mm-hmm. Is there a property type that's the most popular property type just now?
Yeah, and it says in the article, obviously, there's a shift in people's, obviously, what they're looking for in a property. And that's what the people are worried about in and around the cities and towns for flats, obviously, because people have shifted to 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses. Yeah. Because everybody wants a back garden, they want the extra room for an office, they want more living space because everybody's spending more time at home. Because they're doing, obviously we're coming out of lockdown now, but I think even some businesses are still only doing a couple of days a week in the office. So you're still going to be working from home. And that has shifted people's mindset on what they actually need as a rental home.
But then does that mean there's not really a market for flats?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, that the article points that out, and it makes like, oh, nobody wants a flat anymore. We're still renting flats very much so. Because there's a high demand, then I mean, people are prepared to take a flat, even if they were maybe initially looking for a house and ideally would want an upstairs, downstairs, but you get some really nice flats, some good sized flats that have still got a back garden, still got off-street parking. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we're struggling with flats at all, especially not in Fife anyway. Like I say, it may be different in the bigger cities and towns and things like that. But I think in Fife, we're letting properties, and that includes flats as well as houses.
And what sort of net returns are we getting then? You know, so typical, you know, when you do a typical buy to let, and then you pay your interest on your mortgage, and then you've got your managing agent, because obviously, you know, if you're busy, then you're clearly wanting a managing agent to do it.
Yeah.
And then you've obviously got overheads like your insurance and your sometimes council tax in between voids, although that could be avoided. You have as well repairs and improvements, minor repairs and improvements. So what sort of net returns after all that's taken off and the final result? So in other words, the passive income net return, what sort of returns and percentage wise are we getting just now?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at buy-to-let investments, and you take into consideration, obviously, if you're refurbing and obviously all your other costs, generally in the Fife area, you're looking about 8%, sometimes even 9% and more. And I mean, in previous years, we've looked at like obviously around about the 6.5, 7%. Obviously, you're good, but you're well ahead of that, and you're probably averaging about 8% and more.
So probably 8 to 10% is round about the value you'll be getting, but that's passive. You're actually not doing anything for that at all.
No,
that's whatever money you're putting in, you're getting that return on investment. And I suppose is that'll be comparable to a bank then when you think about it.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, and like you say, obviously, you're not wasting any of your time. And how valuable is your time? Because you've got an agent doing all this for you, and then you don't have the worry and stress about, obviously, they mentioned in the article again about obviously increased regulations and changes to tax and things like that. Obviously, your managing agent will keep tabs on all that for you and make sure everything's compliant with the property and everything's kept up to date, and they liaise with your tenant, and obviously freeing you basically to use your own time as you wish. So, and your time, I think, is the most valuable thing as well.
Yeah. So a couple of questions as well. Can you ask for a higher rent for a house rather than a flat?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, rental values are, I mean, you can play around with them slightly, obviously, and within reason of the market conditions, but not necessarily. I mean, houses usually do command a higher rent than flats, but I mean, it depends on what the flat is. I mean, if you've got flats in the centre of town in Cooper, I mean, you're getting quite good rents for them at the moment, and they're decent sized flats. They're not just small apartments. So it depends on what it is and where it is.
I think that's what it comes down to, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's more akin to the value of the property you buy will probably determine the rental value you get. But is it the case that the higher value you go, a diminishing return to a degree?
To a degree, there will be, obviously. I mean, if you're going to invest in a property which quite high value, you might only still get the same rental amount for a property that's up the road that probably costs maybe a third of the price or a half of the. Do you know what I mean? And so that in terms of the return, it doesn't really balance it out so much. So be careful in spending too much on high value properties if you're going to do them as buy-to-lets.
So would the key be to go for as cheapest property possible, or what? What would
I
be
wouldn't say as cheap as possible. I think that there's a happy medium there where you could find something at a reasonable price where you could potentially add a little bit value and get it to a standard where you're going to attract a really good tenant and command a higher rent.
So Susan and David has asked, do you need to buy a buy-to-let mortgage to rent out a property?
Well, of course you will. I mean, unless it's your existing home that you're in and you've moved for work or whatever, you could get consent to obviously let the property from your current mortgage provider. You need to have lived in the property, obviously, for a certain amount of time. But otherwise, yes, you'll need to get a buy-to-let mortgage.
Yeah, ideally, you would want to do that anyway, because
you want to do that anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. You know, you can get consent to let from your existing lender anyway, and you probably would want to do that because, to be honest, you're probably on a more preferential rate with your existing lender on a personal mortgage than you are on a technical on a buy-to-let mortgage. Is it the case that do you pay a lot more interest for a limited company mortgage?
No, and I think if you're going to be like if you're a landlord and you only have maybe one property, you've inherited it, like you say, or if you've moved for work and you're letting your own property, then obviously you do obviously the consent to let. But I think if you're going to be an investor and have build a portfolio of several properties, definitely do it in a limited company.
But you will probably be just a wee bit higher in interest, won't you?
Well, maybe slightly, but obviously you get some preferential rates and things with being a limited company.
I think you get preferential rates when you get to a portfolio landlord.
Yeah,
when you have quite a substantial number of properties, they'll give you a preferential rate, whereas you're just one or two, they'll probably give you a wee bit more. But there's a trade-off there to do with taxation issues, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I mean, Jim, you're the master of taxation.
Yeah. Well, the trade-off in the taxation issues is rather than actually get a deduction at lower rate only on your interest-only mortgage, you'll get deduction at any rate through a limited company because it's a legal entity in its own right. You know, so there's a big advantage to having a limited company, but the offset to that is you would have to do tax returns at the end of the year. You would in your own name, but you still have to get involved in doing company accounts and company returns. It's a bit more regulated, but not too regulated. It's been eased up a bit over the years in terms of the compliance and legislation for small trade owners and small limited companies. Yeah,
and if you're having to do tax returns and things, it all comes back to obviously how valuable is your time and how much time you're going to spend having to do that and things as well.
Do you think the introduction of the ban on evictions just now on tenants and the 6 months notice period has actually put a lot of landlords off, or do you find that that's not really affecting anybody just now?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's not affecting it. Luckily, I mean, we haven't had too many instances, but the ones we have found to be quite detrimental to the landlords that it's affected, and it has had a knock-on effect on a few. I mean, one of the best bits in the article is that obviously the eviction ban is due to be lifted. They are looking at a new approach after that, so what that will be, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, I mean, on the grand scheme of things for us personally, I think it's not been too bad, but we have had one or two cases which the landlord has obviously been affected quite detrimentally, like I say. Yeah. So
I think it's more important that landlords actually feed back to the local MSPs and MPs about the implications about what's happened about this 6 months notice period and a ban on evictions. Because if you don't do that, the government will take carte blanche to say, I tell you what, this is actually working. Let's just leave it
as it is. Yeah.
Do you think that's going to happen, possibly?
Yeah, well, hopefully. And I think it is important that obviously if you're a landlord or investor and things and experiencing issues as a result of obviously things that are implicated by the government like this ban, you need to feed back to them whether it's working or not or how it's affecting you. Otherwise, they'll just assume that it's working and leave it in place. So yeah, that is important to feed that back.
Okay, I think that's it. Have you got anything final words on this article? I mean, the article's in here in this post anyway, guys, if you want to read it again for your own purposes and just recap on it. But, you know, we thought we'd give you some insight into where the current market is just now in terms of Fife, in terms of our market overall. Is there a big demand in one particular area, Richard, just to close off on this? Or is it just all over?
I really think because of the limited supply at the moment, I think as a whole, Fife is quite obviously, the market is really busy. And I'm finding, even like I used to have obviously East New Cooper, and there were certain areas that were busier than others, but I think across the board at the moment.
Do you see that actually changing then in the future, or do you see that it's just continuing like this?
No, hopefully not. But no, I mean, I think, I mean, it's not going to, that level of demand is not just going to cut off. I mean, that's going to continue for a long time. And I think that's quite good and benefits, obviously, new investors and things coming to the market. And I think that's good for the sector as well, that we've got a lot of new investors and things buying property and bringing them to the buy-to-let market.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks very much for your time. If anybody's needing any information or any questions answered, please feel free to message us on these posts. The message will always get to us anyway, regardless. Or you can contact us through the usual channels at the local offices. And until next time, guys, we're Fife Properties for Fife Properties TV. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks, guys.